I just wanted a quiet weekend alone, a cabin deep in the woods, no phone, no people, just silence. But at midnight, someone knocked on my door, and the voice outside said my name. There were no footprints, no one around, yet I kept hearing myself calling back. Now I know some doors should never be opened. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the Bed. It happened in early November, last year, in a rented hunting cabin deep in the Allegheny woods of Pennsylvania. I was alone. My name is Jim, 35, recently divorced, the kind of man who tells himself that quiet will fix things. I booked the place for a Friday to Sunday escape. No neighbors, no cell service, just a gravel road that disappeared into trees the color of old blood and rust. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold iron, and the sky pressed low enough to touch. I arrived before dusk. The cabin sat on short stilts, one room and a small bedroom, a porch that listed at a tired angle, and two doors, front and back. A metal plaque with a number rusted into silence. The owner met me at the bottom of the steps. He wore a field jacket and a look that avoided my eyes. He said the heater worked, the pumps were slow, and the raccoons were bold. He handed me a ring with 2 keys and paused like he had one more thing to remember. "If you hear knocking at night," he said, voice careful, "don't answer the door." I laughed once, because that is what you do when someone tests your nerves. He didn't. He just lifted a hand half an inch, as if the warning might bump into me. Then he left his truck idling and rolled away without looking back. The place was older than the listing photos suggested. Floorboards with the soft give of rot. A picture frame with a landscape turned a degree off level. I checked the windows, locked both doors, and built a small fire. The cabin answered with pops and settling sighs, the sound of old timber adjusting to new weight. I told myself to catalog the noises. It helps. Name a noise and it belongs to you. I set my little digital recorder on the table, the one I carry when I hike. It is a habit I picked up to help me sleep. Play the creek if you cannot hear one. Play wind if the trees are still. Tonight, I would record real wind, real fire, and sleep with something human-made that remembered me. Dark came with no ceremony. The forest withdrew until it was only the porch and a step beyond that where blackness began. I ate an apple, then a second, then drank water straight from the jug. I texted my brother no service even though the bubble would spin forever. I wanted evidence later that I had tried. By 10 the fire had fallen to a quiet orange. I lay on the small bed with the recorder blinking red from the table. I listed everything I could hear, the soft pulse of the heater, the tiny scrape of mice in the wall, the minute crack of wood inside the stove. When you list things, you learn there is almost always another sound beneath the last. At some point I slept. I woke all at once to the kind of silence that means something else is listening. The recorder light still blinked. My watch said 12 o'clock. Not 11:59, not 12:01. The cabin felt like a held breath. Then, 3 knocks on the front door. They were not loud. Not a prank. A measured human sound, the kind people use when they do not want to startle you. Knuckles on wood. 3, with space between like words. I stayed in bed. I told myself it was a branch scuffing in the wind. There was no wind. The knocks came again, the same rhythm, careful, as if the person on the other side was patient and kind and would keep being both until I obeyed. I swung my legs over the bed and sat there with my feet not yet touching the floor, a grown man thinking about the space under a bed. I felt left behind by my life and, for a moment, too embarrassed to be afraid in front of no one. I took the flashlight. I walked to the front door and stood with my ear to the seam. The wood was cold enough to leach heat from my skin. "Hello?" I said, and hated how thin it sounded. No answer. I counted to 10. On 6 the porch creaked, one board, then another. The knocks did not return. I unlaced the chain, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door half a hand. The porch was empty. The beam of my light reached the banister and died in the trees. The wet leaves were a dull, stippled carpet. If someone had walked here, I thought, there would be prints. But the boards were dry. Nothing to read. Something tugged me backward, a pocket worry about what you leave behind when you walk forward. I turned and saw the back hallway as a hallway you do not remember being that dark. The back door latch, which I had checked twice, sat crooked in its socket. The door was not open. It was uncommitted. A breath of cold touched my wrist and did not retreat. I shut the front door, set the chain, and walked the narrow hall. The air claimed the light in front of me like it had paid for it. The back door was not just ajar, it was the idea of ajar, the top right corner sagging a little, the kind of misfit that happens when a frame changes over time. The deadbolt was vertical. I could tell myself I had rushed and missed it. I could tell myself anything. I turned the bolt and pulled the door hard enough to fit wood into wood. The sound was final and official. I stood with my forehead against the panel long enough to hear my pulse fade. Back at the table, I watched the recorder blink. I did not press stop. I did not want to trap the moment in a number on the screen. I added logs to the stove, then sat with my back to the wall where I could see both doors. The fire made a small sea sound, a shushing that tried to shorten the edges on things. At some point I slept again, a crooked, watching sleep. When the weak gray of morning flattened the windows, I pressed stop. The counter showed an honest night. I made coffee on the camp stove and told myself a story about animals, about heat-shifting frames, about dreams that knock and do not belong to you after you wake. I put the recorder to my ear and pressed play. Wind. Fire. A mouse in the wall, brave with darkness. Then a pause, longer than anything else. Then a man's whisper that came from close to the microphone, too close for the table it sat on. "Jim," it said. "You're not alone." The morning looked almost ordinary. The fire had died to white dust, and a thin line of sunlight crossed the floorboards. I told myself what anyone would, it was just the wind, a loose latch, the mind waking wrong. Still, that whisper from the recorder sat behind every sound. It wasn't what he said, it was how close he was to the microphone. Too close for someone who didn't exist. I walked the small clearing around the cabin. No footprints, not even my own from the night before. The ground was soft with moisture, it should have remembered something. I followed the tree line for 50 yards, found the same silence waiting. When I came back, the forest felt heavier, as if the air had folded itself over me. I decided to record again that night. I placed the recorder on the table, facing the front door, and set my phone beside it even though there was no signal. I just wanted the light from the screen, a small blue company. I kept busy until evening, splitting old logs, cleaning dishes that weren't dirty. Every sound was an anchor to keep me from drifting toward what had happened. When darkness arrived, it came fast. The woods seemed to dissolve into one black wall pressing against the windows. I made dinner, canned soup and bread, and left the lantern burning near the bed. The cabin smelled of smoke and metal. I checked the doors twice, 3 times, locked the windows, and tried to act like a man who believed in locks. By 10 I was tired but alert, the way you get when the body wants rest and the mind refuses to trust it. I lay down, the recorder blinking again. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of movement, slow, deliberate steps on the porch. The kind that belonged to someone deciding whether to knock. Then it came, 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. I froze. My throat tightened like it didn't know how to form words. After a minute, I forced myself to speak. "Who's there?" The silence stretched until it felt like a sound of its own. Then a man's voice answered through the door, low and clear, as if he knew exactly how loud to be. "Jim, open the door." He said my name with calm certainty, the way a friend might. I turned on the lantern, its light too weak to push back the corners. "Who is it?" I asked. No reply. The voice had shape, it wasn't a hallucination. I could hear breath between the syllables. I took a few steps closer, enough to see the door shiver slightly with the draft. The fire had gone out. I couldn't see through the small window pane, only the reflection of my own face, pale and wide-eyed. I lifted the lantern toward it, expecting something, anything, on the other side. Nothing moved. After several minutes I unlocked the top latch, but my hand froze at the deadbolt. Something in me refused. The silence behind that wood felt alive, aware. I whispered, "If this is a joke, stop." The porch answered with the soft groan of a board giving under weight. Then another. Footsteps backing away. The sound disappeared into the trees, swallowed whole. I opened the door finally and leaned out into the cold. My breath came out in small white ghosts. The clearing was empty. No prints again. The air was too still. When I turned back inside, I saw something carved into the wood of the outer frame, fresh, pale against the darker grain. 12 o'clock, I ran my fingers over it. The edges were splintered, new. Someone had cut it there within hours. I locked both doors and sat until dawn, the recorder still running. By morning, I was determined to leave. I packed quickly, grabbed my bag, and went outside to load the car. The forest looked the same but felt wrong, as if it was holding its breath. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once and died. I tried again, nothing. Battery fine, fuel full. Just dead. The air had changed, colder, thicker. I checked my phone, no signal, not even a flicker. The silence returned, that same pressed down quiet from the first night. I decided to walk to the main road, maybe 3 miles, but as I reached the treeline a sound stopped me. It was faint, muffled, and coming from inside the cabin. A slow, rhythmic knocking. I stood still, staring at the cabin through the gray light. The sound came again, steady and hollow. Not from the door this time. From the walls. It moved along the side of the cabin, like something searching for a way in, or a way out. I stepped back toward the car, hand on the door handle, ready to run, but the knocking followed the inside of the cabin until it reached the back wall, the one near where I slept. Then it stopped. I waited. The forest gave nothing back. By noon, I convinced myself it had been some trapped animal in the walls. I even laughed once, though it came out broken. I spent the rest of the day inside, pretending to read, pretending I wasn't listening. When night fell again, I lit the lantern and sat by the recorder. "Just one more night," I whispered. "Then I'll find a way out." Outside, the woods went silent. Not quiet, silent, the kind of absence that bends the ear. And from somewhere deep within the cabin, a single knock answered me. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of light that flattens everything. I hadn't slept more than an hour. The walls of the cabin looked different, closer somehow, as if the wood had drawn in during the night. I made coffee just to hear it boil. Every small noise was a relief. The recorder was still on the table, red light off, battery drained. I pressed play while pouring the coffee. At first it was the same as before, the stove crackling, the chair creaking when I shifted, a mouse in the wall. Then, halfway through, something else came. My own voice. "Jim, open the door." It was unmistakable. My tone, my breathing, even the small rasp in the middle of words. But I never said it. I replayed it again, louder. The voice was speaking from closer to the microphone than I had ever been, almost pressed against it. After a few seconds, there was another sound, one short inhale, then silence. I felt my throat tighten. I tried to convince myself that maybe the recorder had looped old audio, maybe it caught an echo from the first night. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. It was a sentence I'd never spoken. I turned it off and sat still for a long time. Later I went outside for air. The forest didn't move, not even a bird. The quiet was heavier now. I walked around the cabin, scanning the ground again. Nothing. Not a print, not a mark. Then I saw it, something new carved on the same tree as before. The number had changed. Under the 12 o'clock someone had scratched another line, "Heard you." I went back inside fast, locked both doors, and pulled the curtains closed. The room darkened. My heart was racing, but part of me wanted to understand. I set the recorder in the same place and pressed record again, speaking slowly into the mic. "This is Jim. I'm the only one here. If someone hears this later, it's just me talking. Just me." The fire smoked for a while before catching. I moved to the bed, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and left the recorder running. I planned to stay awake, but exhaustion wins small battles. When I opened my eyes, it was still dark. I didn't remember falling asleep. The recorder light was blinking again, faster now. I could hear faint static under it, a soft hum like breathing. The stove was cold, the fire long dead. I checked my phone. Midnight. Always midnight. I reached for the recorder to turn it off, but before I touched it, a whisper came from the speaker. It wasn't playback, it was live. "Jim." My hand froze. I whispered back without thinking. "Who are you?" The voice repeated, "It's me. Let me in." It was my voice again, but lower, slower, as if someone was speaking through water. I stared at the small black box on the table, watching the light blink with every word. "It's cold out here, Jim." My pulse hammered. "You're not real," I said. The voice laughed, quiet and familiar. "Then open the door and see." I snatched the recorder, slammed the stop button, and shoved it into my bag. The air inside the cabin thickened, pressing on my ears. I could hear faint movement behind the walls, the sound of something dragging across the wood. I lit the lantern and checked every corner, under the bed, behind the stove, even the tiny crawl space in the floor. Nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin wasn't empty. Around 3, I tried to calm myself by writing down what I'd heard. The handwriting came out uneven. When I looked back, the last line wasn't mine. Someone had written over it, the same words I'd heard on the tape, "It's me, Jim." I backed away from the table, nearly tripping over my bag. The recorder inside had turned itself on again. The red light blinked through the canvas like a heartbeat. I didn't sleep. I sat until dawn, staring at that faint glow. When the first light touched the window, I packed everything, the food, the notebook, the recorder, and stuffed it into the car. I tried the engine again. It coughed, sputtered, and stopped. Inside, the cabin seemed to be waiting. I took out my camera and recorded a message. My voice trembled, but I forced it steady. "If anyone finds this, my name is Jim Carter. I rented this cabin for the weekend. There's something here that talks in my voice. It knows my name. Don't come here. Don't answer the door. Don't listen." As I stopped the recording, the faint echo of my own words came from behind me, repeating perfectly, 1 second delayed. I turned. The door to the back room stood half open. For a moment I thought I saw myself standing there, half in shadow, same height, same jacket, head tilted slightly, like watching. Then the lantern flickered, and the space was empty again. I slammed the door shut and wedged a chair under the handle. The recorder in my bag clicked once more, all on its own. By the 4th night, fear had settled into something ordinary, like humidity. I could taste it but not escape it. The air inside the cabin felt used, heavy with my own breath. I hadn't eaten since morning, only coffee, and the edge of panic. The windows were covered, doors locked, the chair still wedged beneath the back handle. The recorder lay silent on the table, battery out. I couldn't stand the blinking light anymore. I told myself that whatever this was, it couldn't speak if I didn't listen. That was my rule now. Ignore it and it disappears. The forest outside was silent again, the same absolute quiet that made you feel deaf. No crickets, no wind, no leaves. Just absence. By midnight I sat on the floor with the rifle I'd found in the closet. It was old, the kind used for deer. I had no idea if it worked, but it felt better to hold something heavier than fear. The fire was out, the cabin dark except for the small glow of the lantern. I watched the shadows shift on the walls until my eyes started inventing shapes. Then came the first knock. It was gentle, like someone tapping to see if I was awake. Then 2 more, perfectly spaced. I froze. I didn't breathe. The silence after was worse than the sound. A voice followed, calm, measured. "Jim, you forgot me." I gripped the rifle tighter. The voice was just beyond the door, close enough to be speaking through the wood. "Who are you?" I said. "You know who I am," it answered. The tone was patient, almost kind. "Let me in." My throat went dry. "There's no one out there." "Then who am I?" The words slid through the door like smoke. My hand trembled. I could hear faint breathing on the other side, steady, human. I raised the rifle, the barrel aimed at the center of the door. The knob twitched once, then began to turn slowly. I shouted, "Stop!" It stopped halfway. I could see the metal glint in the lantern light. Then everything went still again. The voice spoke once more, softer now, almost pleading. "It's cold out here. You locked me out." I stepped back until my shoulders touched the wall. "You're not real," I whispered. "Look in the mirror, Jim," it said. There was a small mirror hanging beside the door, warped and dusty. I turned my head toward it. In the dim light, my reflection looked wrong, slightly delayed, breathing half a second after I did. I blinked, and the reflection didn't. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. The sound broke the stillness like glass. I looked again. The reflection now stood perfectly still, eyes black in the low light. Then its mouth moved. "Now we're together again." The lantern flickered violently. For a second, the light went out completely. I fired the rifle instinctively. The blast echoed off the walls, deafening. The mirror shattered, raining silver fragments across the floor. The air smelled of gunpowder and something else, wet soil, like the forest had crept inside. I reloaded, shaking, though I wasn't sure at what. The voice didn't return. I checked the door, it was still locked. No damage. No footprints on the porch when I dared to glance through the crack. I felt dizzy, unmoored. Then I heard a faint sound behind me, not outside, inside. Slow breathing, matching mine but half a beat off. It came from the dark corner near the bed. I turned the lantern toward it. Nothing but the empty wall. Yet the breathing continued, soft, rhythmic, human. I stepped closer, holding my breath to be sure. The breathing stopped. The silence folded around me again. I backed away until I reached the table. My hands shook as I picked up the camera to record what might be my last message. "It's still here," I said quietly. "It knows my name. It knows my voice. If I disappear, don't come here. Please." A faint sound cut me off, someone whispering my own words half a second after I spoke them, perfectly synchronized but slightly delayed. I turned slowly toward the sound. It was coming from the broken mirror, from somewhere inside the shards scattered across the floor. Each fragment reflected a different piece of the room, but in every one of them, my reflection was facing the wrong way. I dropped the camera. It hit the floor and kept recording sideways, the image trembling. The door handle began to turn again, faster this time, rattling in place. The rifle slipped from my hands as I pressed my back to the wall. The knocking started all over again, 3 short taps, then a pause, then 3 more. I shouted that I'd shoot, but my voice came from 2 places at once. One from my mouth. One from the other side of the door. "Jim," it said, almost tenderly, "open the door." The handle stilled. The breathing stopped. Then, in the faint echo of the lantern's flicker, 2 shadows stretched across the floor, both mine, moving slightly out of sync. The camera recorded until the battery died, capturing the last sound in the room, a quiet, identical whisper. "Now we're together again." 3 days after Jim stopped answering messages, his brother reported him missing. The rental host told police that the cabin had been booked for a weekend and that no one was supposed to be there anymore. A deputy and 2 local rangers drove out early Tuesday morning. The sky was overcast, the forest still half frozen from the night before. The cabin looked untouched at first glance. Jim's car stood parked in the clearing, a thin film of frost on the windshield. The driver's door was unlocked. Inside, the keys hung from the ignition. His phone lay on the passenger seat, battery dead. The officers found no footprints around the vehicle, even though the ground was soft enough to hold one. They knocked, called his name, then forced the door. The smell hit first: stale smoke, damp wood, and something metallic. The cabin looked as if someone had left in a hurry but never quite made it. A chair was knocked over near the front door. The rifle was on the floor, one shell fired. The mirror was shattered, its fragments scattered across a dark stain on the boards. The table held a small camera, still recording until its battery had died. The red light blinked weakly once before fading. Near it sat the digital recorder, switched off, almost like it had been placed there on purpose. The deputy pressed play. For several minutes there was only static and the hum of the fire. Then Jim's voice, clear but uneven: "If anyone finds this, my name is Jim Carter. There's something here that speaks in my voice. Don't open the door." He stopped, breathing fast. A pause followed, long enough that they thought the recording was over. Then came another voice, identical. "Jim, open the door." The tape ended with a single gunshot and a dull thud. They kept searching. In the small bedroom, the bed was untouched, but the window had been pushed open from the inside. The frame showed splinters, as if someone had crawled out, or tried to. Yet no tracks led away, not even disturbed leaves below the window. One of the rangers noticed deep scratches on the inner side of the front door, near the handle. Words carved in uneven lines: "I let him in." They bagged the recorder, camera, and notebook, all to be analyzed later. The final pages of Jim's notes were almost illegible: broken sentences, repeated words, then a line that simply read, "He sounds like me." The search expanded into the woods, covering a mile radius. Dogs picked up a faint scent leading toward the lake but lost it near the shore. The water was calm, still thin with ice. No footprints there either. 2 days later, one of the rangers returned alone to close the cabin for evidence storage. He said later that he wanted to check something himself, something that hadn't made sense. When he entered, the cabin felt wrong again, too quiet, as if the air itself had weight. The recorder sat on the table where he'd left it, though no one was supposed to have been inside. Its light was blinking. He pressed play, expecting the old audio. Instead, a new voice came through. Not Jim's, not the deputy's. "Hello," it said, cautious, unfamiliar. Then a pause, followed by a second voice, faint, whispering the same word back in the same tone. "Hello." The ranger turned it off immediately. He said later it sounded like an echo that wasn't delayed, more like two people trying to remember who spoke first. That night, he handed in his badge. Months passed. The cabin was locked and marked for demolition after the investigation closed. Officially, the report listed Jim Carter as missing, presumed dead. Unofficially, no one wanted to be the one to take it down. The local sheriff signed the order, but the contractor refused after 2 of his men quit midday, saying they'd heard someone inside calling for help in a man's voice that matched the missing hiker's photo from the report. When the new team finally arrived, they cleared the debris in sections. Beneath the floorboards, near the spot where the mirror had shattered, they found the remains of a small recorder, melted and blackened by heat. The last seconds of the audio were recoverable. It began with footsteps, slow and dragging, moving across the wooden floor. Then a door creaked open, followed by breathing, 2 sets, slightly out of sync. Finally, one voice said softly, almost relieved, "Now we're together again." Then silence. The file ended there. Police confirmed it matched Jim Carter's voice. The official record closes with that note, 1 page long, stamped and filed under unexplained. The cabin site remains fenced off, though hikers still find their way near it. Some say they hear faint knocking from the direction of the trees around midnight. 3 slow knocks, always the same. The last line of the report was added by an anonymous investigator months later. It read, "The voice wasn't calling to him. It was calling from him.